After the CEO's funeral, I didn't mention the 51% stake he left me. I knew the next board meeting would be something they'd never forget. Stay with me while I share how everything unfolded, and if my story moves you even a little, show some love by supporting our channel. You know how much it helps. The funeral was heavy. The church was filled with polished shoes, expensive suits, and carefully practiced sad faces. Charles Whitmore had been a giant in the corporate world, respected, feared, and admired. To everyone else, I was just his assistant, the young woman who fetched coffee, took notes, and stayed in the shadows. But to Charles, I was more. He had mentored me, trusted me, even treated me like family when no one else did. I sat in the second row, close enough to feel the weight of grief, but far enough that no one questioned why I was there. My hands trembled as I clutched the program, my heart aching with the truth only I knew. The night before he died, Charles had called me into his office. He looked frail, his voice softer than I had ever heard, yet still steady. "Amanda," he said, "they'll circle like vultures the moment I'm gone. You've been loyal when they were greedy. That's why I've given you my controlling shares. 51%. It's yours now. Use it wisely." I had stood frozen, my mind reeling, tears stinging my eyes. He smiled faintly, as if already at peace with his decision. The next morning, he was gone. Now, as I sat surrounded by executives whispering behind me, I could already hear the venom in their plan. "She won't last here. They'll push her out within weeks. Richard's already positioning himself for CEO." Each cruel whisper cut into me, but I kept my face calm. They had no idea. Not yet. Richard, the smug CFO, was shaking hands and consoling Charles's widow like he was the new king in waiting. Denise, the COO, was already scribbling notes about transition plan. Greg, the company's legal counsel, didn't even glance my way. Why would he? To them, I was invisible, a placeholder until they took over. But I sat silently, my grief tangled with the burning knowledge of what I held. My 51% was more than paper. It was power. The kind that would flip every single one of their arrogant assumptions upside down. I didn't show it. Not a smirk, not a glance. I let them plan, let them believe I was powerless, a quiet nobody who'd vanish with time. As the pastor's final words echoed in the hall, I stood with the rest, my heart heavy for the man I had truly respected, but also steady with the fire he had passed on to me. They thought the game was already won. They didn't know I hadn't even played my first card yet. And when I did, the entire boardroom would never look at me the same again. The first board meeting after Charles's funeral felt like walking into a lion's den. The glossy mahogany table stretched before me, the air thick with ego and ambition. Richard sat at the head, like he had already crowned himself king. Denise leaned back in her chair, cool and calculating, while Greg shuffled papers with that eager hunger of a man who wanted to climb higher no matter who he had to step on. I took a seat near the end, unnoticed at first, which suited me perfectly. No one rushed to greet me, no polite acknowledgement. To them, I was still just the assistant who'd been tolerated because Charles had insisted. Richard cleared his throat and tapped the table, commanding attention. "All right," he began, his voice smooth and full of smug confidence. "With Charles gone, the company needs stability. I've been here the longest, I know the numbers, and the board will obviously expect me to take on the role of CEO." "Obviously," Denise echoed with a faint smile, her pen tapping rhythmically against her notebook. Greg leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "We'll need to review the official documents, of course. But yes, Richard, your leadership seems the most logical choice." Their words were deliberate, loud enough for me to hear, yet not once did they look in my direction. When Richard finally did, it was with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Amanda," he said casually, "you don't need to worry about all this. We'll take care of things. I'm sure HR will help you transition out once the dust settles. Charles was fond of you, but this is business." The others chuckled quietly, exchanging glances that told me exactly what they thought of me. Nothing. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded on the table. Let them think they were in control. Let them laugh at me. As the discussion went on, Richard laid out his grand vision, talking over everyone, brushing aside Denise's cautious concerns, and ignoring Greg's attempts to insert himself into the conversation. His arrogance was blinding, and yet not one of them challenged him seriously. They were all circling, each waiting for their own moment to strike, but united in their belief that I was irrelevant. The sting of being dismissed pressed against me, but under it burned something else. Resolve. I thought of Charles's last words, the weight of that 51% stake he'd trusted me. These men and women saw me as invisible, but invisibility had its power. They showed their cards freely, assuming I couldn't play. Denise glanced at me once, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if wondering why I was still there, why I wasn't shrinking under the weight of their dismissal. I met her gaze briefly, steady, then looked away before she could read more. By the time the meeting wrapped, Richard was grinning, basking in his own assumed victory. "We'll make it official at the next session," he declared. I gathered my things slowly, letting their laughter and chatter wash over me. And just before I turned to leave, I allowed the smallest smirk to curve my lips. Not enough for them to notice. Just enough for me. They had no idea the storm that was coming. The will reading was held in the company's sleek conference room, a place that smelled of polished wood and quiet intimidation. The attorney, a thin man with silver hair and a stack of neatly bound papers, cleared his throat as everyone settled in. Richard lounged at the head of the table like it was already his throne. Denise sat beside him, her posture perfect, her eyes sharp. Greg had a smug grin plastered on his face, as though this was nothing more than a formality before they divided the spoils among themselves. I sat quietly at the far end, unnoticed as always. My palms were damp, my heart steady but heavy. I knew what was coming, and yet even knowing didn't stop the knot tightening in my chest. The attorney began with the usual: personal belongings, charitable donations, a few properties left to family. The executives barely paid attention, each waiting for the part that mattered, the shares. Richard's foot tapped impatiently against the floor, his smirk growing with every word not addressed to me. "And finally," the attorney said, pausing long enough to make the room lean in, "regarding control of Whitmore Enterprises." Richard straightened in his seat, almost glowing. Denise scribbled something in her notebook, already planning her next move. The attorney adjusted his glasses. "Charles Whitmore hereby transfers his controlling interest, 51% of all company shares, to Amanda Cole." The room froze. The silence was so sharp it rang in my ears. For a moment, no one breathed. Then it erupted. "What?" Richard barked, his chair screeching against the floor as he stood. "That's absurd." Denise's pen clattered from her hand, her usually calm mask breaking into disbelief. Greg leaned forward, his grin vanishing, his eyes darting between me and the attorney like he had misheard. The attorney continued, unshaken. "The document is legally binding, signed and witnessed. Amanda Cole is now the majority shareholder." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Richard slammed his fist on the table. "This is manipulation. She must have tricked him. He wasn't in his right mind." I stayed seated, my face calm though my stomach churned. Fear clawed at me, fear of their rage, of the battles I knew were coming. But beneath it surged something else. Power. For the first time, I felt its weight settle on my shoulders. Charles had trusted me, and now his choice echoed like thunder in this room full of doubters. Denise finally spoke, her voice low but cutting. "This doesn't make sense. Why would Charles hand control of an empire to an assistant?" Their eyes were all on me now, sharp and accusing, as though staring hard enough would make me confess to some crime I hadn't committed. I met Richard's glare, and let the silence hang just long enough to make him sweat. Inside, my heart raced, but I didn't let it show. They wanted me to flinch, to crumble. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. They finally understood. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't powerless. I held all the cards now. The days after the will reading were a storm. Word spread quickly through the company, and though some whispered in surprise or even admiration, most waited to see how long I would last. The executives wasted no time making their moves. Richard was the loudest. He called me late one evening, his voice dripping with false civility. "Amanda, listen. You've put yourself in a dangerous position. If you don't step aside, I'll bury you in lawsuits. Fraud, manipulation, coercion. I'll drag your name through every court in the country until you're ruined." He ended the call with a laugh, certain his threats would rattle me. Denise took a quieter route. I began noticing subtle shifts among mid-level managers. People who once greeted me with warmth suddenly avoided eye contact. A department head who used to bring me updates now sent cold, one-line emails. I heard whispers that Denise had promised promotions, bonuses, and corner offices to anyone who sided with her vision instead of mine. She was buying loyalty piece by piece, and for some, the price was too tempting. Greg worked differently. I caught wind that he was digging into my personal history, old jobs, school records, even my family background. He was hoping to find anything, no matter how small, to smear me with. One afternoon, I saw him walking out of HR's office with a smug look, holding a thick folder. The message was clear. He thought my past could be twisted into a weapon. I won't lie. There were moments I felt cornered, like the walls were pressing in. I sat alone in Charles's old office one night, staring at the city lights and hearing his voice in my memory. "They'll try to break you. Don't let them." That reminder steadied me. Charles hadn't trusted me because I was ruthless. He trusted me because I cared. While they schemed, I started reaching out to the people who really kept the company running. The ones who had no voice in the boardroom but carried the weight of the business on their backs. The janitor who had once confided in me about his sick daughter. The receptionist I always greeted by name when others walked past her like she didn't exist. The warehouse manager I'd helped fight for safer conditions. These were the people who remembered me not as an assistant, but as someone who treated them like human beings. Slowly, quietly, they became my strength. A kind word here, a subtle nod there. Small signs of loyalty that reminded me I wasn't standing alone. For every executive trying to cut me down, there were regular employees who wanted me to succeed, even if they didn't dare say it out loud yet. I knew war was coming. The executives were circling like predators, but I wasn't prey anymore. I was learning how to sharpen my own teeth. And when the next battle came, I'd be ready. I always thought Megan was different. She had been my closest ally in the company long before Charles passed. We'd shared late-night coffee runs, vented about the arrogance of the executives, even celebrated small wins together. In a place where most people treated me like I was invisible, Megan made me feel seen. That's why the truth cut deeper than I expected. It started with small suspicions. Documents I had locked in my drawer somehow found their way into Richard's arguments at meetings. Details I had only shared with Megan surfaced in conversations I was never supposed to overhear. At first, I doubted myself. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else had leaked the information. But the evidence kept piling up until it was undeniable. One evening, I asked her to meet me in the break room after everyone had gone home. The building was quiet, the hum of the vending machine the only sound between us. Megan walked in, smiling faintly, but there was something nervous in her eyes. "Why don't you just tell me?" I asked softly. "How long have you been feeding Richard everything I say?" Her smile faltered. She looked away, arms crossed, shifting uncomfortably. Finally, she sighed. "Amanda, they promised me a future here, a real career. Do you honestly think you can survive this? Richard's been planning his takeover for years. You'll get crushed. I couldn't throw my future away clinging to you." The words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to scream, to demand how she could betray me after everything we'd been through. But instead, I just stood still, watching her like she was a stranger I had never met. My chest felt hollow, but I kept my voice calm. "So that's it? You sell me out, and suddenly your future is secure?" Her eyes flickered with guilt, but she lifted her chin. "It's not personal. It's survival." I nodded slowly, forcing down the hurt that threatened to spill out. "I see." For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and sharp. She looked like she wanted me to fight for her, to beg her to come back to my side. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something inside me shifted in that moment. The naive part of me, the part that believed loyalty meant something, began to die. "Good luck, Megan," I finally said, turning to leave. My voice was steady, but my heart cracked with every word. Walking back to Charles's old office, I felt different. Harder. Betrayal from enemies was expected, but betrayal from someone I trusted, it was the kind of lesson that carved deep scars. That night, I spread out files across the desk, studying every corner of the empire Charles had left me. I no longer cared about saving friendships. The game had changed. If they wanted war, I would give them war. But it would be on my terms, one calculated move at a time. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 in the morning, and the tension in the air was thick before I even stepped into the room. Richard sat at the head of the table, irritated at being summoned on short notice. Denise was beside him, calm but with a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Greg leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, ready to watch me stumble. I walked in with a folder clutched in my hand, my heels steady against the polished floor. For a moment, the room went quiet, as though they couldn't believe I'd dared to call them here at all. Richard broke the silence first, his smirk sharp. "Amanda, what is this? You don't have the authority to waste our time with." I cut him off before he could finish. "Actually, as majority shareholder, I have every authority. And today, we're going to discuss some restructuring." That shut him up. The others shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. I opened my folder and laid out the first document. "Richard, your innovation expansion projects have cost this company nearly $30 million in the last 2 years with no return. Luxury offices overseas, private jets disguised as business development tools, contracts that benefit your friends more than this company." Richard's smug expression faltered. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," I said firmly, sliding another page across the table. "Detailed invoices. Every dollar signed off under your name. These projects end today." The silence that followed was brutal. Richard's jaw clenched, his face slowly draining of color. Before he could recover, I turned to Denise. "And you? I've reviewed quarterly reports. Your accounting leaves out critical details, shell companies, hidden transfers, numbers that don't add up. Care to explain?" Denise's calm mask cracked just slightly, her pen freezing in her hand. "You don't understand the complexity of. I understand enough to know you've been covering something. Either you come clean, or I make sure the auditors do it for you." The board members exchanged shocked looks, whispering among themselves. They hadn't expected me to know any of this. To them, I was still just the assistant who fetched coffee. But now, I had become something else entirely, the woman holding their futures in her hands. Richard slammed his hand on the table. "You can't just." "I can. I interrupted again, my voice sharper this time. I own 51%. I'm not here to play games. Projects that drain us are gone. Shady numbers will be audited. And anyone standing in the way of this company's survival will be exposed. The room went dead quiet. For the first time, I saw something new in their eyes, not just anger, but fear. As the meeting ended, I gathered my papers calmly and stood. My heart raced, but I didn't show it. I looked directly at Richard, whose face had gone pale, and gave him the smallest smile. It was my first strike, and it had landed. The whispers started small at first. A passing comment in the hallway, a raised eyebrow when I walked into the break room. At first, I thought I was imagining it, paranoia after weeks of being under attack. But soon, the pattern became undeniable. People who used to smile at me now looked at me with pity, or worse, disgust. Conversations stopped the moment I entered a room. One afternoon, I overheard 2 junior employees talking near the elevator. She was his assistant, right? Makes sense now. Yeah, everyone knows she must have been sleeping with him. Why else would Charles give her control? The words hit me like a punch. My cheeks burned, but I walked past them without flinching. Inside, though, I was humiliated. Charles had been a mentor, almost a father figure, and now they were dragging his memory through the mud to hurt me. By the end of the week, the story had spread everywhere. I wasn't a capable leader. I was a gold digger who had manipulated an old man in his final days. Richard and Denise had planted the perfect poison. It wasn't just about discrediting me. It was about making me untouchable in the eyes of everyone who worked here. Even people I had trusted began to keep their distance. The receptionist who always greeted me warmly now avoided my eyes. A project manager who once asked for my advice now acted like I was invisible. The sting of it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. But I refused to bow. If I showed weakness now, they would crush me. So I straightened my back, walked the halls like I owned them, because I did, and told myself their whispers didn't matter. Still, I needed to know where this started. Late nights in the office became my routine, combing through emails, employee reports, and communication records. Every rumor had a trail, and eventually I found it. Hidden among dozens of internal memos was an anonymous tip sent to staff, implying I had inappropriate ties to Charles. The sender thought they were clever, but digital footprints are hard to erase. The trail led straight back to Richard's executive assistant, who, of course, answered directly to him. And it didn't stop there. Denise had been quietly meeting with department heads, spreading her own version of the story, adding fuel to the fire with her calm, convincing tone. She hadn't left a paper trail, but enough whispers lined up to confirm her hand in it. I gathered the evidence carefully, storing it away like a weapon I wasn't ready to use yet. Timing was everything. If I struck too soon, they'd twist it against me. I needed to wait until the board, the employees, and the whole company would see the truth with their own eyes. For now, I let the rumors burn around me, my silence mistaken for weakness. But inside, I was steady, patient. They thought their lies had wounded me beyond repair. They didn't realize I was just sharpening the blade I'd use against them. The boardroom was thick with tension, the kind that made even the polished mahogany table seem to sweat under the weight of silent anticipation. Amanda sat at the far end, spine straight, hands folded with deliberate calm. She had chosen a dark navy suit, sharp, commanding, not the soft pastel dresses she once wore to blend in. Across from her, Richard leaned back in his chair, smug, whispering something to Denise, who clutched a stack of papers like they were weapons. "Let's get to the point," Richard said, slapping the table once for effect. "Amanda has proven disruptive. She's tarnishing Charles's legacy with reckless ideas and a lack of judgment. I moved to strip her of her voting rights and leadership position immediately." Several heads around the table bobbed hesitantly. Amanda noted every nod, every calculating glance. "He thought he had the numbers. He thought he'd won." "Seconded," Denise added, her voice dripping with false conviction. "Charles entrusted us with stability, not chaos. Amanda has no experience. She's destroying this company." Amanda let the accusations echo, let them revel in their self-righteousness. Then slowly she rose. "Are you finished?" The room stilled. She slid a folder across the table, its contents spilling neatly before the director. Printed emails, confidential financial spreadsheets, screenshots of private group chats. Every page carried Richard's fingerprints. "These," she said coolly, "are records of Richard orchestrating a smear campaign against me, falsely spreading rumors that I was Charles's mistress, that I manipulated him in his final days. Lies designed to discredit me and destabilize this board." Gasps filled the room. One director muttered, "Good God." Another whispered, "This is damning." Richard's smirk cracked. This is fabricated," he barked, his voice higher than intended. Amanda didn't flinch. "The metadata has timestamps, pulled directly from company servers. If anyone wants independent verification, I'll gladly invite federal investigators to take a look." "Shall I?" The board members shifted uneasily. Nobody wanted government eyes prying into the company's affairs. And if smear tactics weren't enough, Amanda continued, turning her gaze to Denise, we also have the matter of accounting discrepancies. She tapped another set of papers. Profit margins inflated, expenses buried, cash funneled into consultancy fees that led nowhere. All traced back to Denise's department. Numbers don't lie. People do. Denise's face drained of color. That's not what it looks like. Amanda cut her off, her voice steely. It looks like fraud. It looks like betrayal. It looks like exactly why Charles made sure I had the majority stake. The room erupted into chaos. Shouts, denials, chairs scraping against marble floors. Richard tried to rally, tried to roar over the storm, but no one looked at him anymore. All eyes were on Amanda. She waited until the noise died, then leaned forward, her voice slicing through the room like a blade. I am not the girl you all thought you could break. I am the majority shareholder, and from this moment forward, I am in full control. Richard, Denise, you're stripped of authority. Effective immediately. Silence. Absolute. Richard's face went pale, the smugness gone, replaced with something Amanda had long waited to see: fear. The victory at the boardroom should have been enough. Amanda had stripped Richard and Denise of their power, leaving them humiliated in front of the very people they once controlled. For the first time since Charles's funeral, she allowed herself a breath of relief. But the war wasn't over, not yet. The crack came from where she least expected it. Greg, the company's long-trusted legal counsel, a man who had worn loyalty like a tailored suit, was plotting in the shadows. While Amanda focused on Richard and Denise, Greg had quietly aligned himself with outside competitors. His plan was simple: dismantle the company Charles built and sell it off piece by piece, leaving Amanda holding nothing but scraps. Amanda might never have known, if not for a quiet knock on her office door one late evening. It was Elena, a junior analyst she had defended months ago when Denise tried to have her fired over a trivial mistake. Elena looked terrified as she slid a file across Amanda's desk. You need to see this, she whispered. Inside were email chains, financial drafts, and signed agreements that proved Greg's betrayal. Amanda's chest tightened. The man who had once guided Charles through decades of legal storms was willing to torch his legacy for a payday. Amanda felt the sting of betrayal burn deeper than any rumor Richard and Denise had spread. But she didn't cry. She didn't rage. She planned. The next morning, Amanda walked into the building with a new kind of steel in her stride. She filed official reports with regulators, ensuring that Greg's scheme wasn't just an internal scandal, but a matter of law. Then she called an emergency meeting, summoning the board, senior executives, and, most importantly, Greg. He entered smug, confident that Amanda couldn't possibly know what he had done. But when the projector lit up and Amanda displayed the damning contracts and email threads, the room froze. This, Amanda's voice carried clear and sharp, is the man entrusted to protect this company. Instead, he plotted its destruction. Greg stammered, sweat forming at his temple. He tried to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. Regulators waiting in the lobby stepped inside as Amanda finished her statement. Gasps filled the boardroom as Greg was escorted out, his polished reputation crumbling in real time. Amanda didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence as Greg was led away was punishment enough. When the room settled, Amanda placed her hands on the table and looked at each board member. Charles gave me authority on paper, but respect? That I had to fight for. I won't let his legacy, or this company, be dismantled by greed. For the first time, no one questioned her. No one doubted her. Amanda wasn't the grieving outsider anymore. She was the leader. And the look in her eyes made it clear. Anyone who tried to betray her again would meet the same fate as Greg. The boardroom was silent, yet the weight of the decision hung in the air like a storm about to break. For weeks, the tension had built. Backstabbing, secret deals, betrayals layered on betrayals. But today, there was no more maneuvering, no more whispers in the corridor. Today, the vote would decide the future of the company. Amanda sat tall, her gaze steady as the board secretary read the tally. One by one, the names fell into place. Richard gone, Denise gone, Greg exposed. And now, the only name left standing, Amanda Cross. When the final vote was announced, a wave of applause erupted from the employees lining the wall. Some cheered wholeheartedly, others only clapped politely, their eyes still skeptical, unsure if the former assistant could really carry the weight of an empire. Amanda didn't flinch. She knew respect wasn't handed down, it was built, and brick by brick she would build it. As she rose to her feet, the chairwoman of the board extended her hand. Congratulations, Amanda. You are officially the new CEO. Her chest tightened. For so long she had fought battles she never asked for. For so long, they had dismissed her as just Charles's assistant, a quiet shadow in the background. But now the shadow was gone. Amanda had stepped fully into the light. When the meeting adjourned, Amanda walked alone down the corridor, the noise of celebration trailing behind. She paused outside Charles's old office, the office that had once seemed so untouchable, so impossibly far from her reach. With a slow, deliberate breath, she pushed open the door. The room smelled faintly of cedar and leather. Charles's favorite fountain pen still rested on the desk, untouched since his death. For a moment, Amanda simply stood there, drinking in the silence. The chair that had once intimidated her now awaited her presence. She lowered herself into it and felt the weight of the leather press against her shoulders, not as a burden, but as armor. Her eyes drifted to the skyline outside the towering glass windows. The city stretched endlessly before her, a reminder of power, of ambition, of the price people were willing to pay for both. She touched the desk, grounding herself in reality. Yes, Charles had given her the keys to this kingdom, but no one could deny that she had earned every inch of it. Amanda's mind replayed every betrayal, Richard's sneer, Denise's arrogance, Greg's final desperate gamble. They had underestimated her at every turn, and each one had fallen, not because she was cruel, but because she refused to be broken. She leaned back, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. The girl they once saw as disposable, naive, weak, was gone. In her place was a woman forged by betrayal, sharpened by loss, and steadied by resolve. Amanda whispered into the quiet room, her voice steady and final. They thought I was just an assistant. Now they work for me. Do you think Amanda handled things the right way by taking over the company, or should she have walked away and left the chaos behind? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories of betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.